So today I'm going to be speaking to Anne Lynn. Hi Anne.
Hello.
We're sitting by another lovely fire, which is even better.
Yeah. Always good to have a fire.
It is, and obviously this is going to have significance as we get chatting, I'm sure. But, so my traditional first question is what do you do?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Well, it is.
What do I do? Well, I have a healing practice, so I work with plants. But I work in a different way, so I'm not a just traditional herbalist. I'm working more with the spirit of the plants, with people.
Okay.
And I also work within the Huichol indigenous tradition. So I have kind of two branches to my healing work. And I also run fires here at my house. So I do community fires and women's fires once a month. It's a little bit kiboshed at the moment with COVID, but normally that's what I'd be doing. Yeah, so I'd say they're the three things that I'm really passionate about, that I love.
Right, there's a lot of stuff there to unpack. So first of all, how did you... I was going to ask you who are the Huichol, but I'll leave that because that will become evident, I'm sure, as we talk. So, how did it all start off that you got interested in, because I know you're quite a creative person anyway, you're very artistic in your handwriting, particularly, is magnificent. I had a friend who used to do graphology, and I got very fascinated by people's handwriting. So, not that I can read it, it's just that you can get an overview.
Yeah.
That's why I said that. But what was your early days then? What got you interested in things?
Okay, what got me interested in things? I've always been interested in plants. I've always loved plants. Even when I was a kid, I loved being around plants. I was thinking about my mum the other day. She died a few years ago, but she would talk to plants in the house. She had a lot of house plants which she looked after lovingly, and a beautiful garden too. And she would talk to them, and I was thinking, God, yeah. I grew up with her, and people would make fun of her. The family would make fun of her, but I really loved that she had that relationship with plants. She just talked to them like they were people.
That's interesting. And I think quite significant, really.
Yeah, I know.
Looking back
really
at it, you don't sort of think of that at the time. But I think that's significant.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I've always loved plants. And I thought about studying herbal medicine, and it never really, the first part of herbal medicine on most courses is a year of looking at the chemistry of plants.
Yeah.
And that would have been slow death for me. That wasn't what I was interested in. So I kind of gave up on that idea. I worked in lots of health food shops, so I was really interested in food and nutrition.
Yeah.
I had anorexia when I was a teenager, and I became fascinated with our relationship with food. So I kind of went down that route and studied nutrition with Patrick Holford. And I thought, no, that's not it. I was trying to find what it was that felt right, and that was a little bit of it. And I learned a huge amount from him. It was an amazing course, and I practiced for quite a while as a nutritionist. But it was a lot about supplements, and I wasn't sure about that. I worked in a health food shop in Stoke Newington. And there was an amazing Jamaican community there, and they used their herbs so much. We sold dried herbs in the shop, so I learned a lot about how they used herbs and their connection with them, and that kind of fascinated me more than the nutrition course I was studying alongside that job. So yeah, I kind of went a bit more the plant way.
That's interesting, that, because that sort of thing where you get a community that has to transpose itself from one place to another. And there are lots of stories of people, this actually goes back to slave trade actually, where the slaves were bringing with them plants or seeds, and you sort of think, my goodness, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and then that would have happened where people actually migrated. They would have brought plants with them.
Yeah.
So that I thought that's an interesting point you said about the Jamaican community.
We sold a lot of plants that I wasn't familiar with, because they were the herbs they used.
Right.
So
Like what?
Gosh, chaparral was one of the
Oh,
big
right.
ones that they
Don't know what that is.
love to use. Gosh, so long ago now, it's hard to remember. But it was like a health food shop run by a group of people who were part of what they called Ananda Marga. It was a religious group, and they had a little kids' nursery next door, which was Montessori-based nursery.
Right.
So I had this great way into a different world, I guess, through them. And there was one guy there, Janika, who was amazing with the herbs. He knew them inside out. So people come in with their problems, and he'd make them up a dried herb mix, or actually we didn't sell tinctures, we made little creams and things. Anyway, that was a fascinating place to be.
So what drew you to that? Because we've jumped to you sort of, you were actually working somewhere. So.
Yeah, when I was doing the nutrition course, I needed a job, and I moved to Stoke Newton, and this shop was literally around the corner from where I worked, and I walked by and just thought, I'm going to work there. I just knew that I was going to get a job, and I went in and asked, and they said, actually, we do need someone, so I've got this job there to supplement the nutrition course. But as time went by, I felt more drawn towards the herbs than using supplements.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And obviously seeing that firsthand must have been quite fascinating.
Yeah, because I hadn't really grown up with that. We didn't use herbs in my house. It was all whip you off to the doctors and aspirin, and like most of us, I guess. So.
It's interesting that, because I've reflected a lot on sort of like plant lore, for want of a better word, that you picked up as a kid. You fell over or you stung yourself. What was what did you do, type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think actually there's a lot more of that than I realised. It's only in reflection that I sort of think about what happened and what my friends used to say and stuff like this. I mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It was in Cornwall, so there was a lot more stuff going on like that, I think. But my mum was quite good at that, what to pick and rub on something and what have you. I don't know where she got that from, because she was, a London girl, really.
Right.
But
so she didn't grow up in the country?
No, not at all. Interestingly. But yeah, so I think that's interesting. You get used to, and I suppose doing that as a kid, like listening to your mum talking to plants, you don't question that.
No.
Do you?
No, it seemed normal.
That's normal. Yeah. So it was normal for me to, I stung myself, dock leaf, and the fact there was always one near a stinging nettle somewhere.
Yeah.
Which is like, there's probably a few others as well that sort of slipped my attention, but yeah, that's interesting. So we've got this thing where you obviously see somebody using herbs, dispensing them, and that's obviously fascinating that somebody knows what these plants do. It's the first interaction with that. That's always a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because it's like, oh my goodness,
yeah.
You don't have to take whatever it is for such and such. So what's the next step? You're in London at this point then?
I was in London, yeah, and then my then partner and I opened a health food shop in not Covent Garden.
Oh right,
Camden.
So this is a big jump then.
It was a big jump, yeah.
Right,
I was always interested in health foods and supplements, and I worked in this health food shop, and then I sort of had the idea I want to set my own shop.
Oh, okay.
So I did that with my then partner Guy in Camden Town, which is quite a great place to live.
Right.
Yeah, so we sold supplements, we sold health foods, and we did foods. We did takeaway foods, so I did a lot of cooking. as well, and I was quite passionate about that. It was a funny place to be. It was where in Inverness Street, where there used to be a fruit and veg market. I don't know if there still is, probably not. But they really took the piss out of us because we sold organic vegetables, and they thought it was hilarious. So every time the poor guy arrived to deliver the organic veg, all the street traders would, just take the mickey out of him. I felt so sorry for him. But gradually they started coming in the shop and buying veggie burgers,
well, this is how it happens,
salads,
isn't it?
and we got on really well, and they'd start giving us fruit and veg at the end of the day. And but it was a process, and it was a funny spot to be in.
That's quite a big jump, though, isn't it, from working in a shop to running one?
Yeah, I guess Guy, my partner then, he was quite good at having a vision for what could be done. I've never been. Well, I've been good in some areas, but not in that practical sense of what could we do to earn a living. And it was his idea, really, and he drove it. And I just had the experience. I've worked in quite a few health food shops. And I kind of knew what kind of shop I would like to go in.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Actually, because I think one of the problems, I think for a lot of people with businesses, is that it's easy to come out of something because you like it. This is true with music. I like to play the bagpipes, so therefore, I'm good at whatever. And then you realise actually that maybe not an awful lot of people like bagpipes. So that's not true, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot with businesses. People have ideas, but there's no demand necessarily. And that's always a difficult thing to square up, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So if somebody can see that there's an opening.
Oh yeah, it was quite popular, and that was a good spot, really.
Yeah, it sounds like
a lot
a
of
good
young
spot.
people and a lot of alternative people there
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah. So, what else?
I don't know how many years we had that shop, but Guy's mum died in Pakistan, so he was away a lot, and I was on my own with the shop. So I ended up employing people, and it got busier, and it was actually quite exhausting. We lived up above the shop as well.
Mm-hmm. So you can't really escape from it.
Couldn't escape from it. And there was a part of me that just felt like, this isn't it, it was good to do, but this isn't, there's something else. And then I got pregnant and had Aidan, and we moved to Brighton, so I was kind of commuting, and that was awful.
Oh my God.
And then we sold the shop because it just wasn't really working. But it was a great experience to have done it.
It sounds amazing. It
was fun to be in that.
It sounds like it was the sort of thing of its time, it was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, there had been a shop there and it had closed, so we knew there was a demand for it. She just moved for personal reasons, so we just replaced in that very street a shop that had been there for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Brighton.
Moved to Brighton.
We go from one interesting place to another.
Moved to Brighton, and I worked for Neil's Yard Remedies.
Oh, okay.
So I've been there a very long time. I've left now, but I worked there, which was a similar setup to the health food shop in London, with the rows of dried herbs and making tinctures and creams. Absolute heaven for me, job to be doing that, and I did that for many years. So that was so I got more interested in herbs, and through Neil's Yard Remedies, they used to send us on little jaunts down to Dorset. They had a beautiful place in Dorset.
They did have a beautiful
Did you go there, Springhead?
I did. Before it became what it has become now.
Yeah, I haven't been there for years.
Don't go.
Just keep the memory in
keep the memory of
my
the lovely
heart.
little place. That was because we tried to find the place, and of course we ended up in the new place, which was a shock.
Yeah, it's very modern.
Because I just remembered this extraordinary little, like a little paradise of herbal, people growing herbs and then creating these. It was all very sort of small.
It was so small. I was so shocked when I first went there. I was like, what? This is where all...
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously bought in some stuff, but a lot of stuff was grown there for tinctures.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it was actually putting all the stuff together into, I was amazed.
Yeah.
But now it's become massive.
Oh, yeah, the new place, Peace Marsh, is very different.
Interesting. So you went...
I went there, like once a year we'd have a bit of a jolly before the business got really big, so most of us would have time off, we'd go down there. I think we spent a weekend or maybe a long weekend down there, and we'd have different teachers coming, so we had qigong and
Oh
herbal
my
medicine
God!
and
Oh
stuff.
right.
Fantastic. And one of the teachers was Chris Headley, that I know Steve mentioned. And Chris Headley just kind of turned my life around, really. He was an amazing herbalist. He's dead now, sadly. But he was a magical herbalist, you know. And he really understood the spirit of the plants. And that
Right.
fascinated me.
Right.
So he took us on a walk and we made some, I don't know, elderflower tincture, I think we made, and some syrup with elderflower. But it was the walk, in the way he talked to us about the plants, that really kind of opened my eyes. God, I love this. So I did a lot of work with him. He was doing adult education courses in London, which was so cheap, it was amazing. So I'd go up once a week and do that course with him. And he'd get us trying the herbs and talking about where we felt them in our body. You know, so he wouldn't tell us what the herb was. He'd get us more to experience what it did to us, which I loved. And then we'd go on these walks, often in a car park. Yeah, at the South Bank, we were in a car park, and we never moved out of the car park for the whole day because there were so many plants.
Yeah. That's right. That's what's so weird, isn't it? They're all there.
It's, you don't need to be in the middle of nowhere to do this work. They're all here, growing out of the pavement.
Yeah, exactly. They tend to be the ones that people think are weeds.
Yeah, and they're the ones we have the direct relationship with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so he was a game changer for me. I absolutely loved him. And I went on lots of little courses with him. Yeah, it was great.
Because I've done that thing with Steve actually about, you know,
Yeah.
you take something and, you know, you take a tea of whatever it is, you know. And it's like, and then, because there was a group of people, and people start talking, it's like, my goodness, this is, you realise that it's a similar, well, it's not exactly the same with different people, but there is a similarity.
Yeah, there's a theme.
that you sort of go like,
thread.
yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Mm.
And then, as you say, you get to the idea of what is that? What's going on here? Because you can't just go, oh, this chemical, blah blah, right?
Yeah.
There's something else, which is very strange.
Yeah.
So he sort of, it gets you thinking that way because well, I say he gets you, you know, the experience of actually doing some stuff.
Spending time with him, yeah, he was just such a great teacher. And when I was doing the courses with him, I met my now partner Paul, and I was living in Hove and had this little garden with a big rosemary bush. And Paul, I don't know why, decided it would be a good idea to prune the bush quite heavily. And I was out, I got back and there was hardly anything of this rosemary bush left, and I was so upset, absolutely gutted that he'd done that. And for some reason I got all the rosemary, most of it anyway, and put it in a bath, and got in a bath and just lay in the bath with all this rosemary. Because I was cold, I'd been out and it was really cold and wet, I was wet, and I just thought, it's really good for circulation, so I'll just put that in my bath. But it was more than that, it was more like, I just need to connect with the spirit of this plant that I thought he'd killed. He hadn't, actually.
No, they're pretty indestructible.
I know. But anyway, so I had this bath with rosemary, and then I started hearing voices when I was walking around, and I couldn't work out whether there was no person around. But I started to work out that what was always there when I heard this voice was a rosemary plant. And I started thinking, this is really weird. I'd be walking down the road and there'd be a tiny little rosemary bush in someone's window box in London, and it would just start talking to me. And
That's interesting.
I thought, I'm going crazy. Yeah, I'm really losing the plot. But I was still doing the course with Chris Headley, so I told him about it, and he said, this is great. You know, this is the spirit of the plant talking to you, and you have to kind of follow this work. And you need to read this book by Elliot Cowan, because that is all about this kind of way of working with plants. So he kind of pointed me in that direction. God
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this is a bit of a game changer, really.
Yes, totally. He was so encouraging. So far from saying, yeah, you're losing the plot, dear, he said, this is great, and this is where you need to go.
So were you actually hearing it as a voice that
Yeah.
you could discern?
Yeah, it was like
Obviously.
a little old lady's voice.
Oh, okay.
And it kept saying, hello! I think, oh God, what is that? oh, it's this rosemary bush.
No, that is incredible.
And actually a friend of mine, I told her about it, and she said, oh, I've got these friends, Simon and Sue Lilly, who had a company called Green Man Essences. I don't know if they're still going, but she said that's what they do. You know, they make plant essences, but they work with the spirit of the plants, and you need to meet them. So I ended up going on a little workshop with them. But she'd sort of rung them up and said to them, oh, Anne's having this weird experience with rosemary. And Simon said, yeah, what's the voice like? Is it like, hello, like a little old lady's voice? And
Oh,
said, yeah, that's the spirit of rosemary. And that absolutely blew me away.
Yeah, I think when you start to, how can I put this? A lot of interesting experiences. If you took them to the doctor, they'd sort of go, "Oh yes,
Straight.
yeah, you know, you're psychotic or whatever."
Yeah.
But I mean, the same is true with things like music, when you just know something out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and you go like, okay, you can't, or you're playing and you start to read somebody's mind who's playing. You know, you're playing with other people, and you start to read somebody's mind, and that is quite common. You know, you just play what the drummer is going to play at the same time. You know, the turn. You know, so and obviously because they can wire people up now or whatever, I realise that obviously, you know, your brain rhythms are similar. You know, you don't actually need to know that your brain rhythms are similar or anything, like, you know, like brain waves are similar or whatever, because it's sort of obvious, but not on a, you know, not on a lot. It's sort of more of a, how can I put it, right-sided brain sort of thing. You just know that something's happening, but you don't quite know. You can't really put your finger on things.
Yeah.
That's the point, isn't it? With
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah.
So when you try to explain them, they don't do it justice. I think that's a fair comment.
It's very hard to put it into words,
Yeah.
isn't it?
But I'm
To
quite intrigued
experience
that the tonality of that voice is something that somebody else can recognise.
Yeah, he did. And so I did a course with him, and I dragged Paul along, my partner, who at that point was working in the woods and had recently cut this tree down in the woods, because they were doing some coppicing, but there was one tree that he had to completely chop, and he hadn't felt great about the whole business. And we ended up on this course journeying to that tree. I can't remember what type of tree it was, but he got this incredible headache, like terrible headache during the journey, and he got this message that the tree was really pissed off with him and that he needed to go and speak to the stump of the tree in the woods and apologise for what he'd done. And that, for him, that was like, oh my God, that opened up a world for him as well. So that was great that we were both kind of aligned in that experience. Yeah, he just went along to humour me. He didn't expect to have a
No. Well, that's often what
experience
happens
like
with
that.
this, isn't it?
Yeah.
People go along to humour somebody,
Yeah. Just keep them quiet.
or just, you know, keep them company.
Yeah.
It works out that it's often more for them than it is for the person they're accompanying.
Yeah.
So we're obviously now in different territory completely. So that you mentioned earlier, Cal.
Yes.
So is this the next phase of this, or is there something in between?
I kind of wafted around for a while. I worked with Annie Spencer, so I did
Oh.
a whole
Right.
ceremonial training with her, and I apprenticed to her. And she's a wonderful woman. And she kind of said that she helps people find their path, and I really felt that for years. I've been looking, I couldn't find quite the right thing. And through working with her, I'd read Eliot's book, and I told her about Eliot, and she said, I think you need to follow that. That's something that's calling you. So he did then live in California, so I thought, God, I don't know when I'm going to be able to get to California and do a course with him. And I talked to another friend who's a herbalist, and she was really interested. And she kind of took it a step further and contacted Eliot, and it turned out that he was coming to Wales to teach this course, and there were a couple of places left.
Oh, wow.
So we just ended up signing up for this course in Wales, which was amazing. And I had no money at the time. I have no idea how I'm going to pay for this, but I know I've got to do it. So I said yes, and I thought, how is this all going to work? And my mum, which is very uncharacteristic of her, rang me up and said, I've had this dream and I think you need to be a herbalist.
Oh my
and
God.
I want to pay
Oh my
to
God.
do the course.
Oh
This is
wow.
really weird. And I thought, well, it's not exactly herbalist.
No,
there's
but
this course.
yeah.
And I didn't tell her exactly what it was. I just said it's about working with plants and healing people. And she said, right, I'll pay for it. You pay for your accommodation and everything. And it was all set up.
That's incredible.
So I felt like, oh, I think this is meant to be. That was
Yeah.
my first real experience of you just follow your heart and things
Yeah.
will fall into place.
Mm.
You know.
No, that's amazing.
It was, yeah, very uncharacteristic of her to say she'd had a dream for a start and talk about that and then follow it through. She followed it through, which was great.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So this is obviously you didn't do all your training in Wales, presumably.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, with Elliot. Yeah.
Right.
Not the shamanic side of things,
No.
but the plant spirit medicine was all in Wales in a beautiful place. Quite a lot of people. I think there was about 27 of us on the course, just to show how much interest there was at that time. I don't know how many years ago this was. Quite a long time ago. Probably nearly 20 years ago. Yeah. Anyway,
so this was.
embarked on this course.
Is this the first time that you sort of go like, oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah, well, I'd read his book and I just thought I
Yeah.
knew in my heart here's someone that's made a kind of system of medicine out of what's been calling me, and I couldn't work out how to work with it until I read his book, and then had this opportunity to do the course and explore it with a great group of people, and Elliot was an amazing teacher. It's a very, very life-changing course for a lot of us actually, in different ways. Not all of us became practitioners, but changed people's lives. I was thinking about it the other day, how much people changed on that course. So we would do a week at a time in Wales. We'd just all be piled into this quite small cottage, or we'd be camping. So it was very intense and emotional time going through that experience, but very life-changing.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying there, once you arrive at that sort of way of thinking, you can't not change, can you really? Because everything is just different.
Yeah.
See, I'm sort of reflecting on this, because obviously what I'm doing with this podcast is sort of exploring how people arrive at doing the things they do, and I'd already had the thing that there's no straightforward journey from point A to point B, although everybody tells you that there is.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously from my point of view it's just about music, but creativity and the rest of it. It's like, well, you do this and you do that, and then you have to, and they'll say, well, you've got to practice, but they never tell you how to practice. That's that sort of magical thing that happens, and then suddenly all this stuff, you manage to become this thing, but there's no real clear explanation of how that happens. And that's the thing that always fascinated me about learning. And as soon as you start to dig into that and you look at your own experiences and you think, a lot of this is just very weird. How is it that one day you can't play something and the next morning you get up and you can? How does that happen? How is it you can spend 10 hours practicing something, you can't get it at all, and you sort of give up on it, and then a week later you can do it, and you haven't touched it since then, and you go, that's not straightforward, is it? There's something going on here where the way that these things happen, or you develop a skill or whatever, is not linear.
Right. No, definitely not.
So when you get what you're saying there, and the other thing is you get moments of, for want of a better word, revelation. And I've always thought that's quite a good way of explaining it. Sort of the medieval term that something you just know.
Yeah.
You just got it. See, it's like, well, our logical way of thinking is, well, we've got to show you working. You know what I mean? It's that sort of mathematical thing. Yeah, but that, even you got the answer right, it's not right unless you can show
how you got there.
How you got there.
Yeah.
Well, in actual fact, you can't.
Mm.
So the story that you make up of how you got there is only a story.
Yeah.
It's not actually how you got there.
Mm.
There's something else happened. So when you got those, like you're saying, these experiences where suddenly you're now in a situation where you're going, okay, I get this. This is something that we threw out with the, we threw the baby out with the bathwater a long time ago. And this is still operative. This is still what's going on. It's going to change everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
As soon as you look at that and you go, there's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't realise was out there, or in here, or wherever you want to look at it.
Mm.
And as soon as you start to bear witness to that,
Yeah.
it's not the same world anymore.
No, definitely. A doorway opens up, it feels like, and once you've walked through it, you can't go back. You've just got to go forward.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's hard following your heart.
Oh yeah, it's not easy.
Especially when your mind's going, what are you doing? None of this makes sense on a logical level, but your heart knows.
Yeah, I know. That's it, because that's the other thing, as you say.
Mm.
The intellectual bit of you is going like, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here.
Yes.
And it's almost like you have to sort of placate that in some shape or form, don't you?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Because it is the navigator. It's, I've always thought, and I've thought this for a long time about how the intellect works. It's the bit that goes, right, how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And he makes the plan. But then everything else is not to do with that anymore.
Mm.
If you think about sailing a boat,
Mm.
that's his job done, right?
Uh-huh.
And then all those forces come into play, the wind and how you put the sails up and how you tack against the wind and everything, and then something changes. And then you might have to call him back in again. Like, okay, we've arrived over here, so now what do we do?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's only like every now and again the intellect has to come in and go, okay, where are we?
Mm.
Where are we going? And then we're back into that sort of maelstrom of just doing the stuff, walking the path, or sailing the boat, or playing the instrument, or whatever it is.
That's a great way of putting it.
Well, I don't know if it's a great way of putting it. It's just the only way I can explain
It
it.
makes sense, yeah. And it is like that. And our minds are, what's that saying there? Good servants but terrible masters,
Yeah.
the mind,
Yeah, absolutely.
They can take care of the practical stuff. It's the
Yeah.
heart that should be in the driving seat. And that's really the best thing I learned from Elliot, I would say. That, and spending time with the plants works on your heart, it opens your heart. And the more you work with that, the more you trust that inner voice.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
But it's such a process for us because we're so mind orientated, aren't we?
Yeah, well, we live in a different place, a different
Yeah.
world, different, and this is not just recently, this is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we've literally demonised the way that the mind works in order for everybody to be held in line, in a way, I think. We look with suspicion about anything that we don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that's been going on. Because you could maybe at least 900 years in Northern Europe, but it could have been a lot longer than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
I don't know.
Mm.
It's interesting.
Yes.
So okay, so we got. Did you start practicing then?
Plant spirit medicine, yeah. I think it was over a couple of years, the course, and we had to do a lot of case histories because it sounds like we were just swanning around communicating with plant spirits, which is what I thought it would be, but actually there was a lot. Elliot was an acupuncturist and worked within the 5-element Chinese kind of
system.
framework, yeah. So we were taught that, and we taught pulse taking, and we went into the 5 elements very deeply. So huge part of the course was that, which was not what I was expecting at all. But it was such a good framework to have. And I'm so grateful for that now. But at the time, I just want to go and hang out with plants, and why are we doing this stuff? And it was so hard. But yeah, that was the framework. And from that place, you could really start.
That's an interesting point, actually, because that's something that actually came up with Ruby's interview about. There is something about that Chinese system of thinking. There is something in this where they have a very definite way of formulating a structure that allows what it is that they do that's unstructured to work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been interested in sort of like Chinese martial arts, but not, you know, I do a bit of Tai Chi, but that's about it. But I've always been interested in how they think about it. Because although it's incredibly, you know, woo-woo, if you like, if you want to put it that way, it's unbelievably effective.
Yeah.
So you sort of go, well, you can't deny the fact that a little old man could, you know, throw half a dozen young men out of a window, kind of thing. And you know, that's when I first got interested in martial arts. I met a guy who worked in a shop in Gravesend, Scotsman, little guy, and he did, I don't know what he did, wushu or something like that. But he was, you know, he was talking to me about it, and he said, I said, well, how did you get interested in it? He said, well, I was in the army in Hong Kong. He said, I was in Hong Kong, and he said, I was in this little like bar, called it that, you know, it was somewhere that you could get a drink and everything, and there was this, you know, fracas started up with some young guys, and he said, and then out, sort of seemingly out of nowhere, this old man got up, and he said he was an old man, and I'd never seen anything like it, and he literally laid these guys out, and he said, but you couldn't hardly see him move. He said it was jaw-dropping, literally. And then this guy just went and sat back down again.
Wonderful.
And I thought, it's sort of, it's like literally like in the films when, you know, you see that.
Jackie Chan.
Yeah, and I thought, well, from then on, I've always been interested in how they see the world.
Yeah.
And how they could be incredibly pragmatic about things. So that system what you're talking about, there is a sort of it's wrong to say an earthiness about it, but you know, it's very rooted.
It's incredibly rooted,
which is really
around the seasons, and it's so connected to nature and the natural world, which is what I loved about it and what made sense.
Yeah, which is, again, this came out of the conversation with Ruby actually. That seems to be something again that we've sort of lost that sort of thing of like, well, where are we? You know, who are we?
Yes.
Where are we doing this thing? You know, exactly. It's all very well thinking in this particular way, but does it come from here, or does it have that feeling that, you know, when I say come from here, I mean, does it work with where we are? Because a lot of this stuff that, you know, doesn't, you know, I'm talking generally, big things, I see this quite a lot where, okay, you know, we've always appropriated things, every culture does that, you know, that's just the way it is, you know, somebody sees an idea that works and they'll pick up on it, you know. But somewhere along the line, some things don't come from here, or where you are, if you see what I mean. And that's equally true with music. And we, you know, if you think about music, we've appropriated. You know, and even the blues, you know, people go, well, that belongs to them. Well, actually, it doesn't, because the music they were listening to, that developed into the blues, came from London.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. And not just London, France and everything. But London street music, sheet music of London street songs, found their way over to America. And they started to be done by what you could now term as blues musicians.
Wow.
So the classic example of that is St James Infirmary, which of course is in London,
Yeah.
but being sung by somebody in the Mississippi. So you sort of go like, So music does this anyway. It moves around, like everything that we do. So it doesn't matter how you want to look at it. It's just really whether it's like, this is the point I'm trying to get from what you're saying about, has it got any power there? It's like, is there a live feed? Where's the wrong term, but wall socket? Is there a live feed? And I think that's something that I've always been intrigued by watching you with what you do. Is that's the thing that you sort of have got. There's a live feed to what it is that you're using.
Yeah.
If that's is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. And we just have a very deep connection with the plants that we work with. In Elliot, the way that Elliot works. So we journey to the plants that grow around us, and we build a really strong relationship with them.
Right. So you need to explain that thing about the journey. The journey.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Because I know what you're speaking of, but
everyone does. Yeah.
And I have actually. I've had a couple of conversations with people where this has come up, and I've never really explored it enough for people who listen to sort of go, "Oh, crikey, is that what it is?"
So okay. So part of our training with Elliot, when we finally got around to spending time with plants, we'd go and sit with the plant, we'd draw it and look at it, we'd introduce ourselves to it, and we'd give the plants a little offering, which would be either oats or barley.
And why is that?
Elliot said that they were the coin of the realm. They were the exchange that you would give. So you introduce yourself as you would to a person. Hello, I'm Anne. I really want to learn about you and see if there's anything you have to offer our people. And we'd sit with the plant and draw it, and then we'd go back at that point to the classroom, and Elliot would drum, and we'd journey down. So in our minds, we would go down through a hole that we ideally knew of in nature, and we'd come out in a different place, and we would meet that plant in that place, in the journey, in the dream. It's like a dream world, I guess.
Yeah.
And we would introduce ourselves again and give offerings in that dream journey, and see what came from that experience. And that was the part that was most fascinating to me. I think you talked about that earlier, where you're with a group of people and you think, especially doing the journey, you think, I could be making this up, this is all in my mind. And then you go back to the class and everyone's talking about their experience, and you realise that we've all had a very similar experience. Some of us described the same spirit that we met, almost identically, how they looked, what they said. And that is the moment where you think, okay, there's something going on here that we can't understand, but it's very palpable. And that is an amazing part.
So there's a lot of elements then in there, because there's a shamanic journeying aspect to that, isn't there? Because the going down a
household shamanism. Maybe.
Yeah. That's a great term, actually.
Yeah,
so there's that sort of going down a whatever you want, a rabbit hole or a hole in a whatever. Obviously, I've always been fascinated by Michael Harner's book. That's the first time I think I was introduced to this idea of how sort of shamanic idea of going down into the place that you meet things, and obviously then Jung, the sort of active imagination stuff. I hate putting this into little brackets, but this is just for the purpose of explanation. Yeah. Because I've always been intrigued by how we perceive the world, particularly in an altered state, whether that's a state of meditation or a group setting of people, where you've got some joint purpose to something, And I'd include that in that music, you know, when you're working with other people. And we would have done a lot of that type of stuff in the past, you know, particularly sitting around a fire, that we all do.
Yeah.
You know? And again, this is like we're trying to rediscover without that sort of thing of, oh, we're just making this up. It's like, because again, if you come at that from the Jungian thing, it's like, well, yeah, but where are your ideas coming from?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is the making up?
Mm.
Because you can't make something up that's not, you know, we have to use what's in our mind anyway. As the coinage, you use that word, coinage.
Yeah, coinage.
Again, you know, I've put this. I recently did a podcast on songwriting, but like, you know, this is like, we're not going to mess around here. We're just going to go right for the jugular and go, this is how you do it. Simple. Start with a song of somebody else's and change it.
Okay.
Because that is actually what you're doing anyway.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you would be writing something like, I don't know, I use the term a Mongolian, you know, overtone singing song.
Mm.
But you don't, unless you've heard that type of stuff. It's not in your head. It's not your coinage.
Right.
So whatever the inspiration for music, or, you know, how something will talk to you, has got to come from something that you can share. Because you're the conduit of it. So this fascinates me.
Okay.
So what type of experience did you have then on some of your journeys where you go like, oh, that was interesting? Could you share
I
some?
guess the most powerful journey that we did was one to mugwort, because we use mugwort a lot in our practice for
Right.
moving energy and to help with physical problems.
Right.
So mugwort's a big plant for us, and when we did that journey, we couldn't find. We were in Wales, in rural Wales. It was quite hard to find a mugwort plant, and we all ended up, ironically, sitting alongside a road because that's where
Yes.
the mugwort grew. So we went
Yes.
early in the morning, so there wasn't so much traffic, and we were all sitting with the plant, giving our offerings. And for me, that was the most powerful meeting of a plant spirit that I've ever had, where I was like completely in awe of this being.
Right.
It was so powerful, but so loving at the same time.
Could you see, do you see things, or do you feel that's
It was more a feeling
Yeah.
and a kind of download
Yeah.
of how to work with this plant.
Mm.
That, other plants I'd had lovely journeys with, and I've met nice spirits, but this was like,
Yeah.
it's very hard to put it into words, but it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you know, this is like a godlike being that I'm meeting here. And I'm completely in awe, and I'll do whatever you tell me. And that's continued through my practice. And mugwort is such a huge part of my practice.
Because it's obviously got quite a herb law to mugwort.
Yes, all over the world. You know, if you look into it, it's used in so many different ways, and they use it in acupuncture for moving
Use
energy.
lots of option. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so mugwort. So when I did the course with Elliot, part of it was learning the pulse taking, and I couldn't get the pulses. We'd have an exam, so we'd have people sitting there, and we'd have to take their pulses, and we'd have to get very close to Elliot's pulse taking, or we'd fail, and I could not do it because I'd get so nervous. I couldn't feel a thing, so I really struggled with that for ages. And Elliot said, well, you can, there's part of what we do with mugwort which is more physical, helping people with back problems or joint problems or something. He said, you can do that at least, and you know, keep practicing your pulses, and when you get the pulses you can do the whole thing. So I started working with mugwort, and that went on, I can't remember, for maybe a couple of years. And Elliot always said to us, people will come to you, the plants will send people to you, you know, you don't really need to advertise, word gets out, and the plants will send people. And people came to me with back problems, and then they'd come back and say, well, actually this happened as well, and that moved, and I noticed this emotional stuff cleared, and I'm getting on better with my partner. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I started working in a slightly deeper way with mugwort, for a couple of years until I got the pulses. So I kind of went off developed a slightly different connection to Mugwort, which I'm incredibly grateful for, and that kind of makes sense of why it was such a powerful journey that I had with Mugwort on the course. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
It's hard stuff to put into words.
Well, we can't, can you? This is
I can't. I try, but
this is the problem, because we're again. Going back to the idea of creativity. You can't put that into words. This is the trouble. You can only talk about it, and in that way, it sort of finds its way. You see what I mean? And as I say, that again is something I think resonates in a very similar way. That the ideas that you get are the ideas that you get, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
You're not going to get ideas that aren't meant for you, just in the same way as, like you're saying, you're going to end up with the type of people that you can treat, because they're coming to you, right?
Yeah.
And they're being drawn. And I think it's interesting that I don't know whether you feel this, that thought's just disappeared out of my head, actually. As I was going to say it, so maybe that's not the thing to say.
Okay.
But I was just sort of thinking about. Oh yes, I know what it was. As soon as you start to think that way, it becomes more like that. Have you found that?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So that's an interesting point, I think. It's almost like you're inviting in.
Yeah, and learning to trust it.
Yes.
Try and get your head out of the way that's going, this doesn't make sense, or are you doing this, or no one will believe this, or whatever that fear thought is that one brings up. The more you kind of start to follow your heart and trust it, amazing things happen.
Yeah, because I would say that is exactly the same thing as this sort of creative process, like you're writing a piece of music, or you're trying to come up with lyrics or something. As soon as you put all that, you just forget about, I don't believe this, or whatever. Just literally don't think about anything at all. Whether you trust it or not, just nothing. It's that sort of middle space of like, and then things start to happen.
Yeah, they really do.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's getting people to understand that. Very difficult.
Yes, I think it is. Very analytical, try and work everything out in our minds.
Yeah.
There's so much more to life than that.
Yes.
It's just opening up to that.
Yes. So obviously, I think we said about Elliot, you can really see how transformative that was. So where in the scheme of things is the Sacred Fires then?
So while we were training with Elliot, we would have these fires in the evening, so we'd have these really intense lessons all day and going through our emotions and blah blah blah, and then in the evening there was a teepee there in Wales, and we'd all get in a teepee and light a fire, and Elliot would often do what he calls teaching fires, and he introduced us to these offerings that the Huichol people live in the Sierra Madre in Mexico, and the proper name is the Villaralica people, and they have an unbroken shamanic tradition, or an indigenous tradition. It's unusual, but it's unbroken, and they're still very firmly rooted in that. And part of what they connect with is the fire, which they call grandfather fire, Tatuari. And Elliot, at that point, was working within that tradition as well as with plant spirit medicine. So he introduced us to these fires, so we would put offerings into the fire of chocolate and copal and wood and tobacco. And those offerings would open up a doorway for us, so that while we were sitting around the fire, the energy would change quite palpably, and it's like you're being held in this kind of cauldron of energy around the fire, and anything that was kind of squash down in you emotionally would start to move. And it sounds weird, but it's such an incredible experience to have that, and especially to have that when we were doing the course, which was so intense and a lot of studying, and then we'd have that often, even if Elliot wasn't there, we'd still go and light the fire every evening. So we had this experience of being held around the energy of fire, which was very transformative. And then at the end of, getting towards the end of the course, the thought of not being able to have those fires was unbearable, really. It became part of how you move energy and how you connect with something so much greater than ourselves. And at the time there was one person who was holding fires in England who lived in Cornwall, right down near Penzance, so there wasn't much chance of getting to his monthly fires that he was holding. So quite a lot of our course, I think, maybe half of our course, ended up training to be firekeepers so we could bring that back to our communities. Mainly, for me it was quite a selfish, like, I really need that. I can't imagine not having that in my life, and I want to share it with my friend, you know. So yeah, we embarked on this training so that we could hold these fires monthly for our community. So I've been doing that. I've just realised today is the 15th anniversary.
Not today?
Yeah.
Well, there we
today.
go.
First one I did was with Annie Spencer.
Oh wow,
In her
that ties.
garden.
Yeah, well, I like it, synchronicities.
Yeah, she
That's
really
brilliant.
encouraged me. I definitely connected with fire very strongly working with Annie.
Yeah.
And then that thread came through with Elliot. It was like, oh yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, because that's another thing, isn't it? If you think about the most, one of those things that you can sort of go, there is this element of being human, and one of them is definitely fire.
yeah.
Because we couldn't have done anything without it.
No. Cook some food, light
You couldn't do anything. Keep the wild animals away. I mean, there's absolutely nothing. There's no technology that we could do without a fire. Okay, flint knapping maybe, but we would have done that around the fire probably. All right.
Yeah.
So when you sort of look at that, you go like, this is important.
Yeah.
And then obviously all the cultural significance, like you're saying about sitting around a fire. That's something we must have always done.
Absolutely. It's in our
Storytelling.
DNA, isn't it?
Absolutely,
You
in our
see,
DNA.
people come to the fire, and even if they're not sure about doing the offerings or feel a bit weird, you can see that something happens to them, and they're just lost looking at the fire. It definitely opens up our hearts, that it's a great tool.
I think it's definitely something that's really in our DNA.
Yeah.
I think it really is one of the things that makes us human, is making fires, actually. Because again, as I said, we couldn't have gone anywhere. We certainly couldn't have travelled north without a fire. We couldn't have done anything.
Yeah.
And I would say all of the beginnings of our culture and thinking comes from sitting around, telling stories around fires. And stuff like that, and and I think that's quite interesting. Look at the sort of like the Druid, the Bardic tradition, where they talk about fire in the head as being the sort of inspiration, and I think that sort of sums it up really.
Yeah.
That really without fire we wouldn't have anything, not even community. Nothing.
No, definitely brings people together. Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm very biased. I love fire. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So that grew out of the thing with Elliot.
That grew out of the thing with Elliot, yes, because that was part of the Huichol tradition, and because they saw that in the West we were pretty disconnected from nature and from our own hearts, that they gave us the offerings, so we didn't appropriate the offerings. They were given to us as a tool to help us remember, to help us reconnect.
That's interesting. So then you've mentioned the Huichol.
Yes, a few times. Name dropped.
So you obviously have a closer connection with them.
Yeah.
So where did this start?
That started with the course with Elliot. doing the plant spirit medicine, and I still had that feeling. I think I thought, I'll do plant spirit medicine and that'll be it, that's the thing, and I'll be a practitioner and I'll ride off into the sunset. And it was wonderful, and it was definitely part of it, but I felt like there's something else and I don't know what that is. And at that point I still am, but I was very shy then, and I really found it hard being in a group of people so intensely for a week. And when we had a little break, I'd either go for a walk or I'd go to the teepee and sit around the fire. And there was one particular day where I went and sat by the fire, and I didn't have copal or anything there, but there was a packet of incense there, and I was putting incense into the fire and praying, just saying, please show me what my path is. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I know there's something I'm meant to be doing. And I prayed so hard sitting in that teepee. And then I think it was that night, it might have been the night after, I had this incredibly powerful dream, and I just woke up sweating, crying, this dream was really profound, and it frightened me so much. I didn't really talk to anyone about it for a long time. I knew that the sensible thing would be to talk to Elliot, but I didn't, and I think I was afraid of what the dream meant, so it took me a while, it took me a good year or so before because this dream, I had a few more that were similar, and it's not like I kept dreaming them, but they kept working on me. It's hard to explain, but they wouldn't. I don't know if you've had dreams like that where you think, oh yeah, this is something and I've got to do something about this, but I'm not sure what it is. It was like that, and I felt like I was going a bit mad, and I went to Elliot and just said, look, I've been having these dreams, can you help me? And he said, yeah, you're being called to this place in Mexico, the place you describe.
So you saw a place? I
saw a place, yeah. It was a lake in Mexico. The first dream I was in a lake, and I described the lake to Elliot, and that there was this creature living in the lake, and he said, yeah, this is this very particular place, and that's the base camp for this pilgrimage. I think you're being called to this pilgrimage in Mexico, and you need to go, because if you don't go, it's not good. You need to follow this. So he said the first step is you go as a visitor and introduce yourself to this place, this sacred site, and they get to know you and you get to know them, and we'll see what goes from there. Are you willing to do that? And I was like, yeah, I'll do anything, because I feel like I've got to do something, I can't keep resisting it anymore. So I went to Mexico, which was a huge thing. I wasn't flying and going on holidays or anything like that. I had no money. Again, it was like, how am I going to get there? And Elliot said, don't worry about the money. If you follow that heart calling, the money will come. And part of me believed that, and part of me didn't. A huge amount of fear came up. Oh God, how am I going to get to Mexico? And, if I have to keep going every year, it's for a period of time. But he was right. Money came in very mysterious ways. I ended up having exactly the money I needed when, as a visitor, arrived at this lake, and it was exactly as I dreamt it.
That's weird, isn't it?
Cried my eyes out, Just felt like, oh God, this is the place. Went on this very grueling pilgrimage up a mountain, again, which is not something I would normally do. I'm not an outdoor person, but somehow I got up that mountain with God's help, I think. And it felt really right, even though my mind couldn't make sense of it all, I knew that was the right thing to do. So I ended up going on pilgrimage for, it was 7 years in the end, to Mexico. So I'd go twice a year, so we'd go on the pilgrimage, and then we'd go up into the mountains to spend time with the Huichol, the Huichol people, in what they call their homelands, really high up in the Sierras, incredibly beautiful place. And just spend time with them and be involved in their ceremonies. They're so connected to nature, to the land, and the gods, their experience of the gods, and being around that energy is something extraordinary. So I've been incredibly lucky to have that experience.
Amazing.
Yeah, very, very lucky.
Here's a question. Are there things about that experience that you could look right back to your life and go, that was weird? There was something even earlier that happened. I don't know, this just flipped into my head. Maybe you might not be able to.
I don't know. When I was very young, I spent a lot of time in nature, like I said, and I really believe that I could talk to the gods.
Okay.
And I remember telling my dad that, and my dad was a Catholic, very strict Catholic,
Okay.
and that didn't go down that well, really,
No.
strangely. And I remember having a lot of arguments with him about, he would make us go to church every week, as long as we were living in his house, we went to church. And part of me is grateful for that experience of connecting with something, but it wasn't my path, the
No.
Catholic Church. And I had a big argument. I used to say to him, well, I feel like I connect with God or the gods more walking out in nature, being in the natural world, than I do going into a building with a load of people. I can't connect with it. And I remember him saying, if that was true, I would, I'd applaud that, but I'm not sure that is. I think he just thought I was trying to get out going to church. But it was true for me, and finally working with Elliot and going to Huichol people, it all kind of made sense.
Interestingly, though, because Mexico is a Catholic country.
Yes.
I mean, that's a bit of a blanket term, but you understand.
Yes.
But there are lots of very vibrant communities within Catholic countries.
Absolutely.
So then that makes you ask, well, what happened here? Because we seem to manage to destroy all of that. So there is something, and interestingly, because Ireland is always looked upon as being like, that's sort of. But I heard somebody say something that really, it wasn't until the famine that sort of repressive type of Catholicism really kicked off. Now, I don't know, I've only heard somebody say this, but somebody who seems to know, he's an Irishman, seems to know a lot about culture, and that what you could have called an older way of thinking was inherent in Ireland, was very, very evident, to the point that that conversation, if it had been in pre-famine Ireland, would have been much easier, more acceptable. Now, I'm just putting that out there as a thought. But certainly with, if you go to places like South America and, there's a lot of unbelievable cultural stuff going on there that seems to either have taken Catholicism on board.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of them have.
But
it's still kept there. A lot of them have still
because
kept
a lot of the
alongside.
A lot of this is the historical me coming out here. But a lot of these reports of a lot of the Catholic priests and everything were saying, well, the people are saying that they already know Saint so and so, but they call it this, right? And that sort of confused a lot of the Catholic missionaries, that it's almost like something had arrived before them.
Yes, they thought they were saving them.
Yeah, but in actual fact they already knew these characters, these particular.
Yeah.
So you sort of think, well, that's very interesting.
There's a wonderful example of that when you go up into the Sierras and spend time with the Huichols. There's a church in the village that we go to. At some point we light candles, and it was a Catholic church. I think it was Franciscan, I could be wrong, but there's a statue of Jesus in the church. They've put a movieri, which is like the shaman's wand in the Huichol tradition, in the hands of Jesus. So Jesus is standing there holding this shaman's wand in the church, and there's huge. Deer is very sacred to the Huichol people, and there's a big painting of a blue deer on the wall in the church. So
that's what I mean.
It's just like that I love.
That's exactly what I
going
mean.
there. It's like,
I've got a funny story to tell you.
Oh yeah, great.
We went to Barrow in the Outer Hebrides. And of course one of the is it Compton Mackenzie who wrote Whiskey Galore lived in Barrow, right? And it's about the fact that there was a shipload of whiskey that was there was a famous film made of it, but it's what happened to the whiskey. Right. Anyway, that's the story. But it's all based, on an island that is obviously barren. And the film is actually shot on Barrow.
Right.
Anyway, he's buried in a graveyard that's incredibly old, and there's a little church, if you could call it that. It's not really, what you would think of as a church. It's a tiny little chapel, really. But in this graveyard, there are gravestones that obviously are Viking. So it's, we're talking 9th century gravestones, probably even earlier than that. But we went in there, and there was, whoever it was, whether it was Jesus, because there was nothing to say who it was. It could have been St. Patrick, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the figure was green. So you look at that and you go, okay, we've got a green deity of some description that's obviously passing himself off as somebody or other. And there was a baby in a crib, which was a corn doll.
Oh, wonderful.
In a Catholic church, the Catholic chapel. And you sort of go, yeah, it's pretty much hidden in plain sight. What's, And I thought it was more in keeping with this place.
Yeah.
Than walking in and finding, like you could, where was I? Malta. And of course, everywhere you go, every corner, you're confronted by Jesus or the Virgin Mary, coming out of a wall at you, people's houses. You walk in somebody's house, there's like massive statues everywhere. It's amazing. And it's sort of strange coming from our culture, where it's not so obvious, anywhere really. But they literally are looking at you wherever you are. You see what I mean? So, but in Malta, they were definitely not anything other than, the Virgin Mary,
right.
Or Saint whoever, Okay, even with that, you can sort of go, well, Saint, okay, who was he? Who was she? But yeah, so that was interesting. So going back to what you're saying about the church, and maybe those cultures maybe survived a little bit better.
Yes.
I'm not saying they survived well.
Some did.
Yeah, but I'm saying a little bit better in many ways.
Yeah, the Eroica definitely did, and they very high up in the Sierras, they're quite tucked away.
Yeah.
And they're so firmly rooted in their traditions that it didn't seem to have too much of an impact.
So this is obviously another life-changing...
Yeah, that was not what I imagined I'd be doing, going on pilgrimage and going to Mexico. I've never been to Mexico before, but I really love Mexico. Feel very connected to that place, especially up in the mountains, where in the Sierras, where the Huichol homelands are. Yeah,
because obviously Mexico has had a lot of bad press.
Yes.
But it's a big place, really.
It's a very big place, and such diverse cultures. Every area has very different traditions and food and costumes and specialities and artwork and craft, and it's amazing. I so would love to travel around. I tend to just go to the places I have to go and come back. But I'd love to explore it more.
Yeah. I've never been to Mexico, so...
I'm sure you'd love it.
Yeah. So what would you say, tell me a little bit about your experience there, because it's obviously pretty profound. Apart from obviously finding something that is exactly as it was in a dream that you had.
Yes.
That's pretty profound in itself.
Yeah, that just told me, okay, however mad this seems, this is obviously what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And I trust, that's the thing, I totally trust Elliot. He's so full of integrity that, you know, I would trust him with my life. So I was willing to, as he said, sign a blank check. I'm just going, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm just, you know, I'm done with this. So I went on pilgrimage every year and went to the Sierras, I think it was 7 years, and engaged in building this relationship with with 2 sacred sites in Mexico. I'd never done anything like that before. And basically that's the apprenticeship. It's not like Elliot sits us down and teaches us how to be a Murakami, which is what the Huichols call their shaman singers, healers. Yeah, it wasn't that. It was the experience of going on pilgrimages. That was the teaching, and you learnt so much about yourself and your own resistances and blocks to following that path. Yeah, that was the learning, really. It was incredibly hard for me. I found it very hard and grueling sometimes. There's sort of fasting involved, and the actual pilgrimage is very physically demanding. And so part of me would absolutely dread it. That kind of confrontation of you meeting this very powerful being, a bit like this feeling I had with Mugwort. Oh, you do not mess with this mountain that I was connecting with, which is a healing site. That's why I was called to that particular place, I think. Anyway, it was, a huge journey, and to be involved with a group of people like that, because they're people from all over the world. I was the only one in England, so we would connect at this very intense time and go on this pilgrimage where it's like being in a pressure cooker. So you build this incredible relationship with these people and then not see them for a year, and then you'd all be back in this intense experience again. And that was extraordinary to have soul brothers and sisters, I guess, compañeros, both that you travel with and go through that journey together with. That was an extraordinary experience too.
Again, this is something else we've forgotten, is this sort of whole thing of pilgrimage.
Yeah.
But
I'd heard a little bit because my dad was Irish, so, and there's still pilgrimages that happen in Ireland where they'll crawl up on mountains on their knees, and I remember him telling me that, and I couldn't compute that. You know, why would anyone want to do that? But now I can understand.
Oh, yeah. That's
I did my own version of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes sense. But
and again, that's another one of those things that when it's taken out of your frame of reference, or you were never given it as a frame of reference, and you have to relearn that.
Yeah.
But because I've sort of pondered that sort of thing about the thing about pilgrimages, because we just think of them as an exterior journey, but of course they're not really. They're an interior journey.
Yeah.
And that when you learn anything, it's a form of a pilgrimage. It's a long journey with a lot of complications in it that you have to deal with. You know, you have to deprive yourself of stuff and all the rest of it in order to engage with what it is that the pilgrimage is about. So obviously, from my point of view, it's music. You know, that's the reference I've used a number of times in things that I've done. But all the time you're actually on that pilgrimage, it's one foot in front of the other.
It really is.
And you're never at the place until you're there.
Yeah.
You know, it's all that type of thing. And how long is this going to take? And all of that going through your mind. It's the same thing with, you know, any process that you're learning.
Yeah.
You know, and we're really 180 degrees away from that. This idea that, I could just have that now.
Yeah.
You can just order that thing.
Order that on, do a weekend course.
Do a weekend course,
Yeah.
which this has come up a couple of times.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it is that thing that you look at and go, there's something seriously different here. And the thing that we've lost is more about us than the thing that we've supplanted it with.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, that's not right.
Uh-huh.
If we've always done something like that,
Yeah.
what happens when you don't do that anymore and do something else instead?
Yeah.
What does that do?
What do you lose in
Exactly.
that process? I've just been, as part of the course, so I've done the pilgrimage part, and now I'm having more of a kind of learning experience around how the Huichols see the cosmos and that kind of thing we're learning at the moment. And we've been learning about the Tuki, which is the sacred temple, which is the centre of their lives in their communities, and how that all operates. And it's just completely touched me on such a deep level, how they operate and how everything is connected to the corn harvest and the squash harvest and to nature and to each other. So the men and women have particular roles in the Tuki, and they honour the dry season and the wet season, the moon and the sun, and they all have their particular place in the Tuki, and it's all connected. And the villages around that have their own Tukis come together to the central Tuki, so that all the communities are connected because of this sacred temple where they do all their ceremonies. And there's something in that that touched me so deeply. Where is that in our
Exactly.
lives? We don't have that. And it's such a community building thing, and they have to trust each other, they have to rely on each other. That really touched me. So I've just done that, read that chapter. Oh God, that's so beautifully worked out. How, and you can see how that's why they still have all their traditions intact, because it works, because it's practical.
Yeah.
It works for them. They get everything done, keeps them connected as a community. They take care of each other because they have to for everything to work. It's beautiful and so simple.
That's really profound.
It was for me reading that. Even though I've been out there and I've been in the Tukis, and I didn't totally understand how it all worked. I've just been there absorbing and experiencing, but to kind of learn on a bit more about how they see the world is extraordinary. Yeah, and as I always says, they wouldn't do it if they didn't have a practical benefit.
No.
Why would they? Because it's a lot of work. They go on pilgrimage every year. They go on several pilgrimages, and that's all done, and that's expensive for them. And they're not well-off people, but somehow the money comes. They support each other because that is what keeps their lives rolling. That kind of connecting with the sacred sites and bringing the community together. And for me, that's so touching. And kind of like, where was that in
Exactly.
my life?
Well, that's the thing I was going to say to you. This is highlighted by the fact what we're experiencing now as a community. Well, you can call it that.
Yeah.
The fact that for a lot of people, lots of very, very unhappy, unwell people in this situation, suffering a lot of depression and all the rest of it. Because the very thing that we are doing, I mean, the first lockdown was worse, obviously, in that lots of people couldn't even see family members, that were, elderly people, and you think, that is the most bizarre thing.
Yeah.
For what? Seriously. And I often think, because obviously my parents were older when they had me, so there was a more of a get your hands dirty type attitude about life, because they both lived through a war. They grew up in another one. They both grew up in the First World War and lived through the Second. My father had been a soldier, and my mother had to deal with, she managed to be evacuated with her children because she had family members down in the West Country. But the point about it is that they both experienced, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And, whatever else, the Spanish flu and all the rest of it, right? And I just wondered what they would say if they were here about what's going on. Because I don't think they'd be going, isn't it terrible? In that point of view, it's a bit like, yeah, okay, this is not very nice, but come on, and pull yourself together. I mean, we've been through worse.
Yeah.
Because there seems to be, and I'm saying that with, regard to the fact that, there are people dying and all the rest of it, people suffering. But the point is, these things happen, and...
Yeah, and what can we learn?
And what can we learn, exactly.
What is this
because I'm wondering
teaching us about how we're living?
How soft we've become.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who are not well before all this hit.
Yeah.
People who are genuinely, and it's probably worse in America, people that are chronically ill. And we've arrived at that point because of lifestyle and all this. I'm not blaming people for that situation because, again, I've had life events.
Yeah.
But you sort of look at it and you go, well, we do, from the point of view, instead of us thinking about just ourselves, which I think reflects what you're saying about the Huichol people, it's about the community.
Yes.
Well, where's the community?
Yes. In the beginning of lockdown, it seemed to me like it was bringing us together, like people were rallying and helping each other out, and I saw it as a really positive kind of.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying
in the beginning, but I feel
there were positive things.
I'm not so sure that's happening.
But the thing that struck me was the story that Paul told about how essential libraries were to people who had nothing, and some people who had nowhere to live.
Yes.
And then to shut the libraries.
Yeah.
I mean, who, people know that that's going on. That some people need libraries for somewhere to go during the day.
Yes.
So, what are we doing if we're shutting libraries? I mean, this is just one point. I mean, there's the counter arguments and all the rest of it. But this point that you're bringing up about community, I think that brings into sharp focus a lot of stuff. I'm not saying I've got the answer, but I'm just saying that we need to sort of, there needs to be some sort of reflection about what are we doing? How have we ended up here?
Yeah, absolutely. After I finished my pilgrimage, and I was initiated 3 years ago, I think it was, and at the initiation there was a big earthquake, and we talked about that with the shamans and asked them what was going on, and they said, this is the beginning. You as humans, you are so disconnected from nature, from the natural world, and you've forgotten how to live, and these natural events are going to keep happening. And they even mentioned a plague at the time, that would be something that would happen, and weather shifts and more earthquakes and volcanoes erupting, all of that happening, until we started to sort ourselves out. And that, to me, that makes sense. I mean, who knows, but to me that makes sense, because we are so out of balance. Something has got to wake us up and bring us back into learning how to live in connection again with the natural world and with each other. Like you say, we're getting, I think everything at the touch of a button. You don't have to even go to a shop anymore and communicate with someone.
No, exactly. And I think the point about, when we look at how people dealt with things in the past. Again, I'm not saying people weren't frightened and all that, I'm not saying that. But we've got to a point where it was like, oh, these things don't happen to us anymore.
Yeah.
And you think, well, there's an arrogance in that.
Absolutely.
And a sort of a stupidity to think that we've fixed something.
Yeah.
Like, these are natural events. We can't stop those things happening.
No.
So in a way, we just have to be aware and have some sort of connection to how these things are. And not in order to stop them,
No,
but
to understand
to
the
understand.
message that
Yeah.
is trying to be communicated.
Well, the thing is with plagues and pandemics and all this, they are the things that change societies.
Yeah.
You just got to look at that and think, well, that's what they do.
Mm.
That's how they operate.
Yeah.
And there's something within that.
Mm.
Like everything in life, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the important events you would rather have avoided
Yeah.
if you knew they were coming.
Yeah, but actually you learnt the most from
They were the ones that were in the important bits.
Yeah, yes.
Unfortunately, you just had to do them.
Yeah, there's no way through it.
You know.
Mm.
So you're initiated as a. Let me get this right. How do you say it? A Murakami?
Murakami.
A Murakami.
Yeah, which is healer. I hate the word shaman. It's got such weird connotations
it's
nowadays
tricky,
in
isn't
our
it?
society. So it's more about you're
Yeah.
like a,
It is. It is a tricky one, that.
yeah, you're a healer and you're there for your people. You're there for the community. That's the purpose. Certainly in the Huichol tradition,
Yeah.
you're there. You kind of sign your life over to the people. Really.
Yes.
That's what it's about.
Well, it's
not
something
about
you
your own
wouldn't.
power. Or,
No, you wouldn't have signed up for that.
No,
from the
no one
point of
would
view- No.
voluntarily.
No. That's right. That's it. It's
Not as glamorous as people might think. So,
no. That's I think the thing that we sort of have to get our head around.
Yeah.
Because I often joke that there are more shaman and all the rest of it in this part of than you could shake a rattle at.
It's absolutely true. Yes.
In whatever way, you know, maybe that's good on one level. I just find it a little bit tricky on another. But you know, because obviously people are following their own journeys. And,
Yeah, everyone's trying to find a way, aren't they?
But they
True,
are.
and we've lost a lot of our traditions here, though. I mean, they're there. I really believe they're there under the ground.
Well, they are somewhere
Yeah. I do believe that.
because we had to find them in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've just forgotten, and I really believe there's a way back.
And I agree with you on that.
Mm.
It's just we can't think that we're going to find it now. It's going to be maybe so many generations
Yeah.
down the line that somebody's going to go, you're going to look at it and think, well, we won't see it, but
No.
you can sort of go, that looks more like it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's where it is. And maybe a lot of the cues are going to come from, as you know, like your training,
Yeah.
where you can sort of go, that has a different sort of flavour to it.
You see a way of living that's very different, that works and has worked for centuries for them.
And it's all, as you said, practical.
Yeah, it's terribly practical.
Yeah.
You want the crops you want to eat, you want to be able to support each other, this is what you do.
Exactly.
And it works,
Yeah.
so why change it?
And you just go on
And
with
you
it.
protect it, and you keep it intact.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was lovely. I think it's a nice place to.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot.
We have.
Covered
We have.
things.
We've covered a lot of things and a number of things which not come up before. So that's nice.
Good.
This is why I find these chats interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing them.
No, it's because I'm nosy.
I think most of us are fascinated.
Yes,
really.
I think so.
Other
Yeah, I think
people,
that's
and
yeah.
It's lovely to hear people's stories.
I think that's the point, actually, of this, because what's sort of motivated me is if I was starting out on a journey of trying to create, being a musician or whatever, I would have really found these type of things fascinating as a young person. Thinking, well, these are people who do things, and do things in a way that you sort of think, well, common sense would have gone like, that's bonkers. What a bonkers idea, whether it's you're going to start a rock band and all the rest of it, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be an actress, forget it. Whatever it is,
Yeah.
I want to be an Olympic swimmer, well, forget it, type
Yeah.
of thing, right?
Yeah.
But people have found a way of doing stuff, like you say, you've got to go to Mexico, but I've got no money.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, you sort of go, well, that's different.
Mm.
So it's those sort of stories I think are important.
Yeah, there are ways through your mind can't imagine.
Well, yeah, your mind can probably imagine, but your intellect probably would struggle to make sense of it.
Yeah, I certainly couldn't have imagined the way that money came to me.
Oh no, that's right. Exactly.
But it came. Yeah.
That's super.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
It was fun.
And that was another one we can clock up to a fire.
Yes. Thanks, Grandfather.
Well, thanks to Anne. There'll be details in the show notes about the sacred fires, which are all around the UK and obviously in America. Got a feeling they're probably in Europe as well, but there'll be details on the show notes, and also how to get in contact with Anne. Hopefully that came out all right, because the recording was quite difficult for this one. Most of the location ones are. So hopefully you could hear everything clearly. So until next time, see you then.